NASA's latest images of Mars do not show a dead planet. They show a graveyard of perfect right angles, geometric shadows, and the skeletal remains of cities that died millions of years ago. This isn't just geology. These are the ruins of a civilization that may have flourished on our next-door neighbor while Earth was still a chaotic nursery of primordial soup. We are looking at a history that was never supposed to exist, written in the red dust of a world we are only just beginning to understand. For decades, the narrative of the Red Planet was one of silence and stagnation. We were told it was a cold, irradiated desert, a place where life never had the chance to take root. But the higher the resolution of our cameras becomes, the more that narrative begins to fracture. The shadows at the edge of the craters no longer look like random piles of basalt. They look like collapsed walls. The jagged peaks of the highlands no longer look like the result of tectonic shifts. They look like the remains of monumental architecture. When we look at these images, we are forced to choose between two terrifying possibilities. Either nature has developed a sudden, inexplicable habit of building in perfect squares, or we are not the first masters of this solar system. There is a growing tension in the scientific community, a quiet war between what we are told to see and what our eyes are telling us. We are seeing things that defy the known laws of erosion. Wind and sand do not create 90-degree angles. Water does not carve out symmetrical chambers with reinforced lintels. And yet, there they are, scattered across the Martian surface like the bones of a giant. These anomalies are not just isolated incidents. They are clusters. They are layouts. They are what remains when a metropolis is ground into the dust by the weight of eons. In the Cydonia region, the debate has moved far beyond a single mountain shaped like a face. New, high-definition scans reveal a landscape that looks hauntingly like an urban blueprint. Pyramids, some vastly larger than those in Giza, are aligned with a precision that suggests a sophisticated understanding of mathematics and celestial mechanics. These structures are not scattered randomly. They are placed in geometric relationships to one another, forming a pattern that speaks of intent and intelligence. The D&M Pyramid, with its five-sided symmetry, stands as a silent challenge to the idea that Mars has always been a barren wasteland. Moving to the Gale Crater, the Curiosity rover has sent back images that are even more difficult to dismiss. In the blurred background of a standard survey photo, one can see what appears to be a doorway carved into the rock. It isn't a crack. It has a flat floor, a square top, and recessed walls. Nearby, the rover photographed metallic-looking debris, objects that catch the light in ways that no known Martian mineral can. These are the artifacts of a high-tech society. They are the rusted, sand-blasted leftovers of a world that once breathed, manufactured, and dreamed. The silence of the Red Planet is not the silence of an empty room. It is the silence of a tomb. We see hollowed chambers tucked into the sides of cliffs, structures that resemble ancient watchtowers, and long, straight lines that look suspiciously like the foundations of transit systems. Nature builds in fractals and curves. Intelligence builds in grids. When we see a grid etched into the crust of another world, we are seeing the fingerprint of a creator. Who were these creators? To find the answer, we have to look back at our own oldest records. The Sumerian tablets, the oldest written accounts of human history, speak of a race called the Anunnaki. They were described as gods who descended from the heavens. For a long time, researchers assumed they came from a distant star system. But the evidence on Mars suggests a much more local origin. The Anunnaki didn't come from the stars. They came from the world right next to us. The descriptions in the ancient texts match the environment of Mars with startling accuracy. They speak of a lower world and an upper world, of a place where the atmosphere was failing and the rulers sought resources to save their home. If Mars was once a lush world with a thick atmosphere and flowing water, which NASA has now confirmed it was, then it was a prime candidate for the development of advanced life. But something went wrong. A planetary cataclysm, perhaps a massive asteroid strike, or a series of nuclear-scale volcanic eruptions, stripped the planet of its protection. As the Martian atmosphere began to bleed into space, the inhabitants would have faced an impossible choice: stay and die, or look to the blue world hanging in their sky. They would have looked at Earth, a young, vibrant planet protected by a powerful magnetic field, and seen a lifeboat. They were not explorers visiting a distant land for curiosity's sake. They were refugees. They were the survivors of a dying world, looking for a place where they could start over. This changes everything we know about human origin. If the Anunnaki were Martians who fled to Earth, then we are not the masters of this world. We are the descendants of the survivors. Our legends of gods coming from the sky were not metaphors. They were historical accounts of a high-tech civilization landing in the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia. They brought with them the knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and architecture, the very skills needed to build the ruins we now see on the Martian surface. The face on Mars and the pyramids of Cydonia are not just curiosities. They are the ancestral monuments of the human race. When we build skyscrapers and monuments on Earth, we are unconsciously mimicking the architecture of our original home. We are repeating the patterns that were etched into our collective memory before we ever set foot on this soil. This is why the ruins on Mars feel so hauntingly familiar. They are the archetypes of our own civilization. But the question remains, what happened to the ones who stayed behind? The images from the rovers show a world that didn't just die, it was destroyed. There are areas of Mars where the soil is rich in isotopes that, on Earth, are only found in the wake of thermonuclear events. There are craters that do not look like they were caused by impacts, but by massive, focused energy. Was there a war? Did the civilization on Mars tear itself apart before the atmosphere failed? Or was the failure of the atmosphere a result of their own technology? The more we explore, the more we find ourselves looking into a mirror. We see a civilization that reached the height of its power and then vanished, leaving nothing but dust and stone. We see the ruins of a society that could move mountains and build across craters, yet could not save its own world. And now, we are the ones sending rovers back to that graveyard. We are the ones planning to send humans to walk those silent streets once again. There is a profound irony in our current space race. We talk about colonizing Mars as if it is a new frontier. We talk about terraforming the planet to make it habitable for the first time. But we are not pioneers. We are returning to a house that burned down 1 million years ago. We are poking through the ashes of our own history, trying to remember the names of the gods who once lived there. Every time a new high-resolution image is released, the veil grows thinner. We see what look like statues, half buried in the sand, faces that look human, or at least humanoid. We see pillars that have been snapped like toothpicks, yet still show the intricate carvings of their makers. These are not the products of random chance. They are the products of a culture that valued beauty, order, and legacy. They wanted to be remembered. And for millions of years, they have waited in the cold dark for someone to come back and look. The official stance remains one of cautious skepticism. Scientists call these Pareidolia, the tendency of the human brain to see patterns in random data. They tell us we are just seeing what we want to see. But at what point does a pattern stop being a coincidence and start being a fact? When you have dozens of right angles in a single square mile, when you have structures aligned with the stars, and when you have doorways that fit the dimensions of a body, Pareidolia is no longer a sufficient explanation. It becomes a shield, used to protect us from a truth that is too big to handle. The truth is that we are not alone, and we never have been. The solar system is a graveyard of civilizations that came before us. Mars is just the most visible example. It stands as a warning to us, a red beacon in the night sky. It tells us that no matter how advanced a civilization becomes, It is always at the mercy of its environment and its own nature. As we prepare to send the first manned missions to Mars, we need to ask ourselves what we are really looking for. Are we looking for a new home? Or are we looking for our parents? Are we looking for resources? Or are we looking for the blueprints of our own soul? The red dust beneath our future boots once knew the footsteps of those who called themselves gods. They walked those streets, they built those towers, and they watched their world die, just as we are watching ours change. The ruins of Mars are a bridge between our past and our future. They suggest that the story of humanity did not begin in a garden on Earth, but in a city on a world that is now a desert. We are the orphans of a planetary catastrophe, finally finding our way back to the ruins of our cradle. But there is a final, darker thought that haunts the edges of this discovery. If the Anunnaki left Mars because it was dying, and they came to Earth to survive, what happens when Earth begins to fail? We are already looking back at Mars as our next destination. We are already talking about leaving the blue world for the red one. The cycle is repeating. We are the survivors' descendants, preparing to return to the graves of our ancestors, perhaps to try and rebuild what was lost, or perhaps simply because we have nowhere else to go. When the first astronauts finally stand in the Gale Crater and look at that stone doorway, they won't feel like explorers. They will feel like trespassers in a tomb. They will realize that the silence of Mars isn't an invitation, it's a memory. And as they walk through the ruins of those ancient cities, they will have to face the ultimate question that has been hidden in the red dust for eons. Are we going there to discover the past, or are we going there to repeat it? The Anunnaki are gone, but their structures remain, screaming a truth that we are only just beginning to hear. We are not the first, and if we aren't careful, we will not be the last to leave a graveyard among the stars.